Europe has overtaken Asia and the Middle East as the largest importer of weapons, marking a major shift in global defence dynamics. New findings show European states sharply expanded their weapons purchases between 2021 and 25, driven largely by the security fallout of Russia's invasion of Ukraine and a renewed push to strengthen national defence. Deutsche Welle correspondent Thomas Sparrow joins us now from Berlin. Thomas, g'day. So Europe is now the world's biggest recipient of arms. What impact is this shift having in Europe?
It is indeed a major shift as Europe becomes the major destination for large arms in the world, overtaking Asia, overtaking also the Middle East. And it's no surprise that the main driver behind this shift, the main driver behind this trend is the war in Ukraine, and in particular, two reasons related to the war in Ukraine. First, obviously, support towards Ukraine. European countries, since the beginning of the war, have said they will support Ukraine not only politically and economically, but also militarily. So that means that they've been sending different types of weapons to Ukraine. But second, European countries have realized that they have to step up their own defense procurement, their own defense spending when it comes to also making sure that their own militaries are strong. They see a perceived threat from several countries, in particular from Russia, and as such, countries like Germany, like Italy, like France, have stepped up their own defense to try and make sure their own militaries are strong. These are the two drivers behind this trend that now positions Europe as the main recipient of large arms in the world.
So with Europe increasingly reliant on outside suppliers, especially the US, how is the continent balancing immediate needs with long-term ambitions for more defence independence?
You mention a very important point, because the fact that Europe is trying to spend more on defence does not necessarily mean that Europe is trying to spend more on defence by buying only European weapons. In fact, Europe is indeed reliant on outside suppliers, in particular the United States. The United States is the biggest exporter of weapons in the world, and it has increased its spending towards Europe, its exports towards Europe. So that's one side of the situation here in Europe, the fact that they've understood that for the short term specifically, they need to buy weapons that are already available. And most of those weapons that are already available come specifically from the United States. But at the same time, European leaders have understood that they have to work together when it comes to common procurement, for example, to common military projects as well. One example is air defense. And that's where at the same time, for the medium and long term, they are trying to buy more European and produce more European weapons as well. So you have those two elements that work hand in hand. The short term, which is basically buying weapons that are already available. The medium to long term, which is trying to become more independent from countries like the United States.
And looking specifically at Germany, which has stepped up both its military purchases and its role as a major arms exporter, how is Berlin positioning itself? And is there any historical sensitivity around this?
When the war in Ukraine began, that marked a major shift also here in Germany. It was a shift that was described as a Zeitenwende, a change of era, and that basically meant that Germany, and in particular the German government back then, was willing to leave behind an era of careful diplomacy, to step up its defense procurements, to make sure that its military, the Bundeswehr, was more active internationally and was better prepared to deal with international conflicts. And that's what behind Germany's also increasing its spending on defense. At the same time, however, Germany has been for a long time a major exporter of weapons, and that's also something that has increased. No surprise, most of Germany's weapons, or a large amount of Germany's weapons, go to Ukraine. So that means that Germany's element of arms export is also growing. You ask about the sensitivities, and indeed it is a very controversial topic here in Germany. On the one hand, because of Germany's history, there is a certain reluctance of having a strong Germany in the international arena when it comes to that military component. But on the other hand, there is an understanding, especially among politicians, that Germany needs to play a more important role internationally, not only when it comes to diplomacy, but also when it comes to defense and the military. So you have, again, different views on this very important, but at the same time, very controversial topic.
OK, Thomas Sparrow there in Berlin. Time now.